All right, today we are going to learn about harmonizing a melody. So one of the requirements on the piano proficiency exam is that you take a melody, you'll be given a melody, and you are going to do mostly primary chords, but then you'll be required to add in at least one secondary chord. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the steps. I've given you all a melody to start out with. So the first thing that I want you to do is practice playing through that melody about 3 times. Just get comfortable with how that sounds, and then we will go from there. I'll give you a couple minutes. Okay, go ahead and let's take a break with that. So after playing through that a couple of times, what key are we in? Who can tell me? G major. Okay, good. So before we go any farther with this, I want to ask you a question. Besides for this being a requirement of the piano proficiency exam, what do you think is the benefit to learning this skill? How does this help you be a better musician? Anybody want to share with everybody?
Helps you understand the music you're playing.
Okay, absolutely. Helps you understand the music you're playing. Anything else?
Well, depending on what field you're going into, you might need to use it if you're going to be accompanying the chords, for example.
Okay, great. Yes, definitely a good skill for accompanying. Absolutely. Do you think that it helps with your aural skills? We already talked about understanding the music. And just when I look at a melody, I think, okay, there's something there, but it's incomplete without that harmony. So you're taking something that you see, but learning how to hear and complete that, make it more complete. Okay, so we've already done the first step, and that is to get familiar with the melody. We figured out what key it was in. We know that it's major, not minor. Okay, and now let's talk through what are the primary chords in the key of G major. Okay, G, there's the one chord. What's another one?
Yep. Oh, not bad.
You're thinking key of C, huh? Okay, D, there's the 5/7. And then we need what other chord?
C.
C, the 4 chord. Good. Okay, so what I want us to do right now is I want us to play through our chord progression. I'll demonstrate that. So in the key of G major, with both hands, we're going to go 1, 4, 6, 4, back to 1, 5, 6, 5, and 1. So just practice doing that a couple of times. Get comfortable with that. Okay, great. Let's pause there. Does everybody feel confident with that? Sometimes you just have to feel it in your hands before you can even think about adding the melody. It just helps to get those harmonies kind of in your fingers a little bit. Okay, so the next thing is that I want you to try to add in the melody just with blocked chords though. Eventually we're going to put in an accompaniment pattern, but everything we do right now I want you to just do blocked chords. So first of all, we have to look at the music and figure out where might you put in a 1 chord. So let's talk through that a little bit. So the first measure, how do we know what chord we're going to put in? What kind of things are you looking for just to know what chord you might put in that melody?
The outlining of a triad.
The outlining of a triad, absolutely. So in that first measure, we see two G's and 2 B's. So that's a good hint for what kind of chord? The 1 chord, okay? The second measure, what do you see? What chord might fit there? 5. I think that's a good option, absolutely. Okay. The third measure. Did someone say 4? Okay. Which note kind of tells you maybe a 4 chord might work here? The E, that's right, okay? So, by the way, if you're going along and you can't remember maybe what chords would fit well, or I mean what chords you have in the key of G major, you may just take a pencil and write in the notes of the primary chords on your paper. That might be helpful just to remind you, okay, what chords am I dealing with here, okay? All right, so we kind of took care of the first line there. And then the second line, what do you see in measure 5? Okay, so there's a, yup, okay, there's a C in there, so maybe we could put in the 4 chord in the second half of the measure there. And then in measure 6, you guys are kind of quiet today. Okay, right, back to the 1. What could come in the downbeat of that measure? 5, absolutely. Okay, and then the last couple measures.
Second to last measure looks like it might be 1 chord.
Good, absolutely. Actually, with the exception of the C, it actually outlines a 1 chord, doesn't it? Okay, and then the last measure, 5 to 1. Great. Okay, so if you want to pencil that in a little bit, that is fine. It's a great way to practice for this. And then once you've done that, why don't you go ahead and try playing through with the just blocked chords in the left hand and then a right hand melody on top of that. And I'm going to listen a little bit just to see our progress here.
What finger do you want us to start on for the melody?
That's a good question. I would start on a 1.
1.
Yes.
And then for the F sharp, I'm getting stuck with the thumb on
Yeah, that's a great question. So a second measure, we had a comment about getting stuck on the F sharp with the fingering. So I would start on a 1. 1, 1, 2, 3. And then maybe thumb on the A, 2 on the F sharp, and then back to thumb. A little smoother transition there. Great question. All right, let's take a little break from that. Is there anyone who's not feeling comfortable with putting in those chords while playing the melody? It's going okay? All right. So the next step in harmonizing a melody now is to figure out where we can insert at least one secondary chord. Okay, so you can, I always tell people, simple is best. Okay, we don't need to insert multiple secondary chords. Like I said, it just has to be one on the proficiency exam. So first of all, let's talk about what are our secondary chords. Our primaries were the 1, the 4, and the 5. So we have 3 secondary chords. What are those? Okay, the 2 chord.
6.
Okay, 6. And?
7.
Okay, the 7 is really, it's the leading tone, and we would use the 5 over the 7, so we don't really consider that one of the chords to use, because the 5 is just going to be stronger. But we have one more, so the 2, the 6, and the 3. Okay, what is the quality of all 3 of those chords in a major key? They're all minor chords, right? So that's one way that you can remember them. With the primary chords, we've used all major harmony. Okay, so now to stick in even one secondary chord, what do you think that'll do for the music?
More interesting.
Make it more interesting, absolutely. Give it a little bit of variety. Okay, so who knows? Let's talk about just a 2 chord for a second. In my opinion, it's one of the easiest to use because of the way that it commonly resolves. Does anybody know how a 2 chord usually resolves?
5.
To the 5, absolutely. So when you're coming upon a cadence, sometimes that's a good place to look for. A place to put the 2 chord is, you know, okay, here comes a cadence. I'm gonna look for a spot for the 2 chord, and then that'll resolve to the 5/7, to the 1. So why don't we actually start by looking at the very end of the melody in measures 7 and 8. Where had we said we were gonna put a 7, or not a 7, a 5/7 chord at the end there?
The last measure.
Right, the downbeat of the last measure. Okay. So, do you think that you could substitute a 2 chord there? And then go to 5/7? So it would sound like this. 2 chord, 5/7, 1. It's a little bit quicker harmony, a little bit quicker change there. Let's spend just a minute or so trying that out. All right, good. Sounds good in the headphones. Lots of good things happening. Okay, so that's one possibility, and right there would meet your requirement if this were your melody for the exam. But let's do a little bit more with this. So, how about the 6 chord? Does anybody see, just looking at the music, do you see a place that maybe a 6 would go? What are the notes of a 6 chord in this key? In the key of G major? E, G, B. Okay, great. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Okay, we've all heard that, right? So if you look at those first 2 measures, would that type of harmony progression work? So the progression is 1 to 6 to 4 to 5 back to 1. Try that out. See if that works with the melody. All right, very good. I hear some of you even trying to put in some ornaments in the melodies. That's very fancy already. That's great. Okay, so let's work with those two chords. The 6 chord in the first couple measures, and then the 2 chord. By the way, you didn't even mention it, but what are the notes of the 2 chord in this key? Talked about the 6, but not specifically the 2. A, C, E. Okay, good. So the next step of harmonizing a melody, now that we've figured out our primary chords, our secondary chords, we've practiced it with blocked chords and the melody, now we need to start working on an accompaniment pattern. Okay, so I want to talk about 2 different options for an accompaniment pattern. There could be several different ones, but let's focus on 2 different ones. So one I call the umchak, something like this. Okay, and that would be, what kind of character do you think? Because you really want to think about your character as well in the melody before you pick an accompaniment pattern. What kind of character does that suggest?
The waltz.
Okay, kind of a waltz pattern, absolutely. A little more upbeat, right? A little cheerful maybe. The other pattern I want to talk about is the arpeggio. Okay, so. Okay, so breaking up the triad has a little bit more flow to it. Okay, which one do you think is more appropriate for this melody? The second one? Okay, let's work with the second one. Before we start playing, what's our first approach to that? What are going to be our notes on the 1 chord? How would you break those apart? G, B, D, right? Let's just stick with root position. Okay, we could do some inversions, but let's start out with root position. Okay, so there's our 1 chord, 4 chord. Outline it for me, please. C, E, G. Okay, and then let's outline the 5 chord. What are the letters for that? D, F sharp, A, and if I want to add a 7th in there, it would be C on top. Good. Okay, and now we are going to add in also the secondary chords. So tell me the letters of the 2 chord again.
A, C.
Good, A, C, E. And then the 6th chord?
G.
E, G, B. Okay, so go ahead and mess around with that a little bit, and I'll listen for that. All right, go ahead and take a break from that for a second. How's everyone doing with this? Do we have any questions about what we've talked about today? Pretty clear? Let's review the steps. So the very first step, if you're given a melody, what are you going to do first?
Decide what key it's in.
Okay, figure out what key it's in and actually play through the melody. Get comfortable with it. Then what are you going to do?
Harmonize it just with primary chords first.
Good, okay, so first you have to figure out the primary chords and then start to harmonize it. And are you gonna put in an accompaniment right away?
Start with block chords.
Start with blocked chords, absolutely. Okay, and then what's next?
Think about what the secondary chords are.
Good, think about the secondary chords. Okay, identify them, maybe write them down on the paper so you can remember them. And then,
Find a couple places to substitute those in.
great. Find a couple places in the music where you can substitute those in for the primary chords. Okay? And then,
Decide on an accompaniment pattern.
decide on an accompaniment pattern, right, and what's gonna determine that?
The character.
Right, look at the melody, see what the character is, and then find an accompaniment pattern to go with that. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.